Welcome to the Workplace Wellbeing Essential Series. I'm Mari Ryan. I am the CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to this expert interview where we explore topics that impact employee well-being. My guest today is Dr. Elia Gourgouris. Dr. Gourgouris is a founder of the Happiness Center, an organization of world-leading experts in the field of positive psychology. Together, they have helped thousands of individuals, both personally and professionally, to achieve happiness, success, and wellness. Dr. Elia is a happiness and wellness expert and the #1 best-selling author of 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness. Oops, that's the newer book. Sorry, that's the new book. Didn't get the other book. I got to order that other book.
That's okay, though.
That first book has been translated into 5 languages, and he's the co-author of the highly acclaimed new book, 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, a practical guide to emotionally dealing with pandemics and other disasters. Dr. Elia is an international keynote speaker. He's a UCLA graduate and has a PhD in clinical psychology. Welcome, Elia.
Thank you so much. And, Advancing Wellness and the Happiness Center, you and I have a lot in common.
We sure do. That's exactly why we're here for this conversation today. So as we reflect on 2020, what a year it's been. We've had so much to deal with. We've had pandemic, climate change, social unrest, political upheaval. And while we undoubtedly have learned a lot, we know that our resilience has certainly been tested this year. Perhaps in this, we can reflect on this year, the 2020, and we can look at what it takes to navigate in a crisis. What have we learned and how those skills can carry us forward? How do people react in a crisis? Are there different ways that people respond?
Yes, there are actually 4 different ways. But first, I want to share a little bit more about the crisis that we're facing across the globe simultaneously, because this is a key, right?
Sure.
We have at least 4 of them. Obviously, COVID-19. We have the mental health crisis where depression, anxiety, and stress is up an astonishing over 1,000%. Just according to the United Nations, we have over 1 billion people with a B who struggle with depression, anxiety, and stress. And mind you, no pre-existing conditions. This is key. In other words, they didn't have this before this happened.
Right.
Between you and I think this is way underreported. There's no way only 1 out of 7 people on this planet are suffering from this. I think it's 6 out of 7, if not 7 out of 7. So that's crisis number 2. And then, of course, you have the economic and financial crisis just in the United States with tens of millions of people unemployed and hundreds of millions of people unemployed across the world. A couple of billion people underemployed or basically feeling financially insecure. In other words, how am I going to take care of myself and my loved ones? And then, of course, like you stated earlier on, we have the political, social, and racial strife and the climate change. Human beings are quite resilient. We can handle 1 or 2 crises at the same time because we've done it before. We can't handle 4 or 5 simultaneously, especially when there seems no end in sight. And mind you, we're not even talking about people's personal crisis, like let's say they're going through a divorce or a separation or they have a sick child. We're not even counting those. So back to your original question, how do people react to crisis? There's typically 4 ways that they do it. The first one is what we call the victim. Now, what is the victim? The victim is, why is this happening to me? Poor me, basically.
Yeah.
As if it's not happening to 7 billion people. Why is this happening to me? So poor me, they get down on themselves and they get depressed and so on. Number 2 is we like to call the critic. Now, the critic, regardless of what the federal, state, or local government says, or the United Nations or the World Health Organization, it doesn't matter. They criticize everything. For example, Elia, you should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Okay, Elia, never wear a mask when you go outside. What are you trying to do? Kill me? Like, no matter what you do, they criticize everything. Like that's what they do.
Right.
Morning, noon, and night. Then we have the third type is, we call it the bystander. Now, mind you, this is a good person, but truly overwhelmed by the changes that are taking place and the feelings of out of control. Think of it of the deer with the headlights look. Like they literally do not know what to do. They might look to their neighbor, look to the left, look to the right. But they're frozen. And what do these 3 have in common? They offer no solutions. They don't move the needle forward. It's not a positive outcome. Then we get to the fourth type, which we call the navigator, which is the basis of this book
Mhm.
and the programs that we run, how to navigate a crisis. So what does the navigator do differently? Number one, they start with positive attitude. Like, this too shall pass. I know humanity, we're getting our butts kicked right now. That's a fact. However, this too shall pass. And then they practice self-care, which, self-care is the most crucial thing. If my batteries are not full, as a matter of fact, for this book, I created a personal health assessment for people to take 20 questions that looks up your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and see how we're doing. Couple of minutes, you get an assessment. Maybe you're doing okay physically, but mentally and emotionally really struggling, or maybe mentally you're pretty sharp, but physically or spiritually you're struggling. Let's find out where we're at.
Right.
Um, One of the things that's really important about these four personality types, however, is that it exists within every human being. Now, this is my psychology hat on right now. This is the Dr. Elia speaking. It's not like one person is a navigator, the other one's a victim. No, all four of those exist within each one of us. Me personally, believe me, I was the victim when everything shut down in March. All my speaking engagement across the world got canceled in 1 week, email after email. And was I did I have the deer with the headlights look like, oh no, what am I going to do now? I was planning on going to Barcelona in October, which I ended up doing actually, but I did it on Zoom. Not the same as actually being in Barcelona.
Right. Of course not.
And did I feel like a victim? Poor me. Why is this happening? You're done right. And have I been critical of the federal government's response to this crisis? Yes, I have. And I feel legitimately so. However, and this is the key for the listeners, if I criticize the government or anybody else for 2 months straight, I'm doing myself no good, because I'm robbing myself from my own personal wellness and happiness. So you want to criticize, get out of your system, do it for an hour, scream your head off. I don't care what you do. You want to feel like a victim, which is normal to feel like, why is this happening to me? That's a normal human response. Be a victim for an hour or two, feel it fully, immerse yourself into victimhood, but then shift and pivot and become navigator. Honestly, this book, I wasn't planning on writing a book this year. Not at all, because I was busy. My whole year was booked, right? Then I realized I can't speak, I can't travel. What can I do to make a difference? Because that's really what motivates me and drives me, is making a difference to this world.
Right.
And got the message and wrote the book with my partner, Coach Khan Apostolopoulos, and we got out in 45 days, and man, it's been crazy since then.
Amazing.
So
That's
become
great.
a navigator. That's the key. And when you're a victim or the critic, do it for a short time. Don't live in victimhood or blame.
I'm just curious, do we have, of those four personas, do we have a dominant personality type?
Yes, I think we absolutely do. I mean, I happen to be a navigator because I always like to do stuff, and I don't feel sorry for myself too often, but from time to time, like really, I was so looking forward to going to Barcelona. I got to be honest. When it got canceled, I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
I've never been to Spain. This is one of my bucket lists. But what can I do? And what differentiates is this. I can't control so many things in life. So the question is, what do I control?
Right.
And I certainly can control my attitude towards all of this.
Yeah.
I may not like it, but you know what? This isn't going to kill me. And as a matter of fact, I feel like the opportunities going to 2021 are bigger and wider, at least since the financial meltdown in 2008. Like, 2020 could be a fantastic year, not just to survive it, but to thrive it.
Right.
But you have to have a navigator mindset.
Of course you do. Yeah, I get it. So let's go back to this concept. You talked about the extent to which people are feeling emotionally stressed, and certainly on the verge of burnout for many individuals. You talk about this mental health crisis as being unreported. What steps can individuals take to recover from this situation? We're hoping that kind of the end is in sight. The vaccine is coming. Things are getting hopefully more normal. But what can individuals do to recover from this situation? What's your suggestion?
Yeah, I think two things. Number one, we need to be flexible and adaptable, more so now than ever. And the analogy that I like to use is the oak tree and the palm tree, right? The oak tree in massive, huge tree, tall, I mean, strong as ever. During a storm, if there's enough saturation of the ground and enough wind, what happens to oak trees? They come crashing down.
Fall right over.
People, cars, and homes, right? The palm tree, on the other hand, relatively thin, it can bend. And I want you to think about the storms of life. Now, this isn't just a hurricane. At the peak of the hurricane, the peak of the storm, it bends, sometimes almost parallel to the ground. But when the storm passes, it raises itself up again and survives. And actually, its roots are even deeper than they were before because you have to hold on for dear life. And as I've shared this with audiences across the world, people have said, we like the analogy, that's a great visual, but what does an oak tree look like in real life? Like in human, like a human oak tree is the person that says, well, I've done these things for 45 years. I'm not going to change that because of the pandemic. That's the way we do things around here. I'm not, that person is going to break.
Yeah.
The flexible and adaptable says, yes, I can't have the old normal and I need to navigate to the next normal. So how can I do that? I need to be open, flexible, adaptable. And this isn't true just for individuals because we talk to organizations and companies every week. And so whatever made you successful, even as a company prior to the pandemic, is not necessarily what's going to make you successful in 2021. So this is where innovation, creativity, openness of mind, like how can we do things differently? Maybe go into a hybrid workforce, perhaps, that could be even more productive than what you had before. If you're not open to these things and you're an oak tree, you're going to be stuck, and other companies and your competition is going to pass you by.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And, flexibility is the thing I hear most often is something that's essential, both as an attitude and as an approach in life. And I'm just curious from your perspective as we continue this concept of the well-being and how we can recover from this. How can employers support their employees from a mental well-being perspective?
So I train a lot of HR senior leaders. And to me, basically, if you have someone that's under you, in essence, you're a leader. I don't care if it's one person, 100, 1,000, or 1,000,000. So even remotely, you can do that. And this is actually what I tell them. It's like when you call in to check in with your folks, don't ask them how they're doing because they're going to say, I'm fine. Yeah. Close the door, tell them the door's closed, lean into the camera and say, how are you really doing? How are your loved ones? How are your kids? How's your significant other? And what can I do or what can this company do to make your life better and easier? Do you know that the biggest organizational need right now, and this comes from research from like thousands of HR directors, you know what it is? To ensure the mental and physical well-being of their employees. You and I both know that in the old days, that wouldn't even make the top 10.
Right.
The second need, of course, is employee engagement, effectiveness, productivity, and so on. Well, guess what? You can't get to number 2 unless you take care of number 1 first. So it's a great question that you asked that. I'm so glad you asked that. So what can they do? Number 1, they need to be more vulnerable, more real, and more transparent as leaders. In other words, after you ask those questions and you're sincere and authentic, lean in and say, by the way, I've been kind of depressed too lately. I mean, this has been really a hard year for me and for my family. We're struggling. I've had an elderly parent who's sick. I'm concerned. Like, open up your heart and be real. People need that and want that more than ever. Because if you sit back and say, oh, I'm sorry that you're having a hard time, if you don't say anything, there's going to be a complete disconnect. So be open, be real, be human. And so when you connect with your folks, that's what the next level of great leadership looks like, is exactly what I just described. And if you do that, I promise you, people, not only will they trust you and feel safe with you, but they're going to bust their butts basically to give you their very best to help your company be successful. That's what you got to do.
Well, that's really going to require leaders to be empathetic, to have compassion, and to really be listening for their employees to really feel that connection and feel like they really do care.
And then after they listen or if they hear something, act upon it. Yeah. The worst thing you can do to your employees, like, I hear you, I empathize with you, thanks for those, and then do nothing. Like, you better not even ask the question, how are you doing? Like, don't say anything. If you ask and you truly want to know, and they share something with you in openness and vulnerability, it's up to you to take action, and the sooner the better, actually. Because when you reinforce that, what are you saying? It's like, no, I truly care. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of my favorite quotes all time, said, your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear a word you're saying.
Love it.
No, it's because it really, that's life, what that's all about. That's what relationships are all about. I can say I love you till the cows come home. If I don't show it in a meaningful way, it means nothing.
Well, let's go back to this idea that you bring forth in your book around, when we're dealing with any kind of a crisis, and the fact is, you've stated that we've got multiple that we're enduring right now. Let's talk a little bit about resilience and what role resilience plays in all of this. And then also, how can employers play a role in supporting the resilience of their teams, their employees?
Yeah, I mean, I think without resilience, we're going nowhere. Like, and I know that's a catchy phrase. Mindfulness used to be a couple of years ago. Now resilience is a phrase. What does resilience mean to you, honestly? Like, what is resilience? Is the endurance, right, under difficult circumstances, prolonged, because that's key, right?
Right.
I used to say life is not a sprint, it's a marathon. I've had to change my statement. Right now, life is not a marathon, it's an ultra marathon.
Right.
Like, it's not 26 miles, it's 100 miles. And then they keep moving the,
Yeah,
no, you got to keep
you
running.
can't see the finish line.
Right.
There's no finish line.
No, although I do believe in 2021, like you said, with vaccines coming, probably after the holidays, we're going to have a significant spike just because Christmas, holidays, and New Year's and so on in January and February. But I think after that, we should begin to see, and I'm an optimist by nature, this spring, a decline as more vaccines go, a decline in the cases, and hopefully by next summer, or hopefully by next fall, and by the way, we're not going back to the old normal. If people want that, that's not going to happen. Life will be different.
Right. Of course it will.
But different doesn't mean worse necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of great things that are going to come out of this. So, and yes, we need to endure it. Resilient. I think being supportive of one another, like really, the last key to navigating a crisis is kindness. And we start with self-care. We talk about flexibility and so on, when positive attitude, win with kindness. So when I share this message, I've had people online, just like you and I are talking right now, who have pushed back. And they're like, Dr. Elia, are you serious? I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm stressed. I'm out of work. Are you really asking me to help somebody else? Are you serious? Like, what am I, my brother's keeper? And you know what? I push back full time. I'm like, no, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your sister's keeper, and your mother's keeper, and the neighbor's keeper, and the homeless person down the street, or someone that's 10,000 miles away in India. Because in the end, we're all brothers and sisters. And if you're listening to the sound of my voice, I guarantee and I promise you, you're better off than somebody else. All you got to do is look around. So then I push back. So they kind of go back. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense. But then they come push back again and say, well, how? How can I help somebody when we're isolated, when we're quarantined, when I can't go outside, I can't see anything? I said, there's so many ways.
So many.
You get a prompting, get on a call, a text, Zoom, however you do, and say, John or Mary or Nancy, I've been thinking about you. How are you doing? And be sincere, because what is the worst thing that somebody can say? I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. More than likely, however, it's kind of curious, Elia, that you called at this time because I've been kind of really down. Thanks for reaching out. And therefore, that is an act of service by itself. And then you make somebody else's day feel better, that they're thought of and loved. And it's a win-win. As you know, I talk about kindness and happiness as being interconnected and related. I do a podcast, The Kindness and Happiness Connection. Happy people by nature do acts of service because their batteries are full, right? They're full.
Exactly. Right.
On the flip side, when you're down and you go outside of yourself and you perform an act of service or kindness, it innately makes you feel better and happier. So you will never regret helping somebody else in need, even if it's a quick phone call.
So true. So true. We need more kindness in this world. Well, let's just think about 2021, as you started to mention. What message do you have for us that will help instill both hope and optimism? I know you to be the optimist. So what will instill some hope and optimism for 2021?
I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. I realize 2020 has been one heck of a year, unprecedented in modern history. Like most of us, none of us are alive that really know anything like this. You have to go back to the Second World War in some ways. And most people were kids at that time. So 2021, after it's always darkest before the dawn. This is one of my other favorite sayings. 2020 has been dark, but there's a new dawn coming. And for organizations and for employers, it's a great opportunity to navigate and to do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a wealth of, to me, as the optimist part of me says, there's so many things we can do better and create more work-life balance as people, there are a lot of people that are not going to go back to work, at least not in the old way.
Right.
Or if they do, it'll be hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the benefits of that? You know what? Less traffic, less people out, more time with your loved one.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of benefits that
Lots
we
of
need to be
benefits.
thinking about.
Yeah.
An innovative way to, I'll tell you, even being on Zoom, I've done several webinars and presentations around the globe. More people have seen me this year, even though I haven't traveled at all.
Right.
Because you have this, all of a sudden, the world
New
is like your
platform. Right.
new platform, right? So meaning that we can have greater impact to a lot more folks, but we have to be able to adjust. If I said, you know what, I don't like Zoom, I don't like this camera, I like being live, which I do like being live, I'm not doing it. Remember the oak tree, right? The oak tree would say that I'm not doing it, I'm going to wait. Well, okay, you can wait for like 2 years before they call you to give a keynote again live.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can navigate and then do it like this and see all the great blessings that come as a result of that. So,
well, indeed, there's so many blessings that we do have to count for everything that's gone on in the last year, and that we can look forward to with the optimism and hope that you've instilled for us. Elia, if our audience wants to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
dreliagourgouris.com, that's my speaker website, or LinkedIn, again, Elia Gourgouris, PhD. You can find me, or thehappinesscenter.com, which is my company. And love to connect with any one of you that wants some happiness in your life.
Well, thanks so much. And just a reminder that you too can find the 7 keys to navigating a crisis, and just hit that buy button on Amazon. Thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your wisdom, and for the wonderful ways in which you are impacting so many people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure. I love your questions. They're different than other podcasts. I do podcasts like 2 or 3 times a week. You ask some very insightful questions, which is instead of the regular questions you get all the time. So thank you for your very thoughtful questions. I appreciate it.
Well, this was fun. It's always great to spend time with you. Thanks so much.
You too. You bet.